It's the turn of the century. Deep in the bowels of the Paris Opera House lurks a mysterious figure who is coaching and instructing a young soprano in the opera, meanwhile engaging in other activities such as decapitating somebody and impaling other people and disemboweling someone and skinning people up. The Phantom of the Opera. So, The Phantom of the Opera. This is a movie that we've seen a million times. What a lot of people don't understand is that almost every version of this film is different. There's the silent film with Lon Chaney. There's the film with Claude Rains from 1943. There's the musical, which is what almost everyone knows it from. I don't have to explain the story to you. Almost everyone knows the basic storyline of The Phantom of the Opera. But today I'm going to review the 1989 film that starred Robert Englund, because while certain people definitely know what The Phantom of the Opera is, many people may not have heard of this film, which really is in and of itself kind of a pop culture oddity. The Phantom of the Opera stars Robert Englund as the title character. Most people obviously know Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. In fact, 1989, when this film came out, that was basically all he was. And he was so popular for being Freddy Krueger that they decided that they were going to market this movie as basically Freddy Krueger is the Phantom of the Opera. Not just in the advertising campaign either. I mean, even as the film progresses, it's all about that moment of seeing him disfigured and burned, and it is very Freddy Krueger-esque when you finally do see the makeup. There's no way to review this film without comparing it to other film adaptations of the story. First of all, I'm just going to come out and say Phantom of the Opera is one of my favorite stories of all time. I love the book. I love almost every adaptation that there's been of it. Of course, I love the musical like millions of other people do. But this film, to me, is I wouldn't say one of the lesser adaptations of it, but it's definitely different, and you can tell when you're watching it where the differences come in between what the script intended it to be and kind of what the studio was really pressuring them to make. Other than Robert Englund, we have the character of Christine, the young soprano, played by Jill Shalin, who was also in another film I reviewed recently called Popcorn. Here she is almost exactly the same kind of character. She's the naive teenage girl who inevitably has to deal with the villain of the story. And you know what? She's fine in this, even though I don't really think she gives too much toward the performance. I don't even think she does her own singing in this. I think she does kind of play the character as a little less three-dimensional than some of the other adaptations have. Robert Englund himself, he's pretty good in this. A lot of people, I don't think, realize this. He is actually an amazing actor. He's a classically trained actor. I think a lot of people think Freddy Krueger and they think, oh, he's just the wisecracking serial killer, and that's all he is. That's all he is in a lot of movies. It's actually a shame, because I think here in this movie he was allowed a little room to stretch. Not much, but a little. And in the dramatic scenes, and even in the romantic scenes, I think there's a side of Robert Englund that we don't see in other movies. He really does play the sympathy of the character just as well as he plays the menace. The rest of the cast is basically your average Masterpiece Theatre British cast. There aren't a lot of names here that I'm going to pull out, because the only person I think, other than Robert Englund and Jill Shalin, that anyone might actually know is Bill Nighy. And they probably don't know him from this, but he's actually a pretty well-known actor today. You might know him better as Davy Jones in the Pirates of the Caribbean films, or as Sean's stepdad in Shaun of the Dead. He doesn't really have a lot to do here, but his scenes are always great because he's that same kind of snarky British guy that we've all come to either love or hate. Now, this is a movie that's going to divide some people. I think some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it. There aren't going to be too many people in the middle. Because of that, I definitely think, especially if you haven't seen the movie yet, that there's some things I should warn you about. The first thing is that because they had Robert Englund cast as the Phantom, because they had Freddy Krueger as their villain, I think that there was a lot of pressure put on the filmmakers to make it basically a slasher film, to take Phantom of the Opera and make it into a slasher film. Now, I'm not going to get into whether I think that was a smart move or not, but in their defense, I will point out that, anyone who's read the book, The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux, will tell you that it is a dark story. It is a violent story. It is a frightening story. It is all those things. A lot of the adaptations, especially the musical, are kind of guilty of making the Phantom this tragic, romantic character. And while he is to some extent, that's really not what he's about in the book. So I actually give props to this film for making him scary again. That being said, if you're a fan of the musical and you think you're getting into the same kind of thing with this, you're not. You're going to hate this movie if that's the case. This is a bloody movie. This is a violent movie. There are a lot of gory scenes in this and a lot of gory killings. They treat it like a Freddy Krueger film, only the different character. Now, I, for one, totally dig this movie. I think next to the musical, I don't know if I would say that this movie, in my mind, is better than the musical or better than the 2004 film that had Gerard Butler and Joel Schumacher did. I wouldn't say that this film is better than that, but it's not like it's a far drop from it either. It's just a different interpretation of it. That's what I'll say. It's a different interpretation of it. Among the changes they make, though, other than not having the chandelier drop, they do not drop a chandelier in this film. I remember reading somewhere that they were going to do it, they wanted to do it, but there were budget restrictions. They couldn't figure out how to pull it off. Another big change that was made is because they wanted to make this kind of like the Hammer horror films of the 60s, they decided to move the setting from the Paris Opera House to an opera house in London. Now, before you start throwing all kinds of complaints, going, no, the Phantom of the Opera is supposed to be in France, it's supposed to be in Paris, I'm old, that's the only version of the story I know. Look, I actually think it was a great idea that they set this version of the film in England instead of Paris. If you're going to have a Phantom of the Opera where the Phantom is this serial killer who preys by night, what a perfect idea to set it in the time and location of the Jack the Ripper murders. That's something that not until the second or third time that I watched this movie I picked up on, and I went, that's actually kind of a cool idea. I never would have thought of it that way, but it makes perfect sense. In addition to the change of location, they do also give the Phantom an entirely different backstory than he does in the book and in other versions. Once again, you'll either dig that or you'll hate it. This is actually kind of a hard film for me to rate, because there's how I feel about the movie, there's how I perceive it, and the rating that I want to give it, but at the same time, I want to kind of remind everyone, this is the rating I am going to give the movie, and I do realize that a lot of people are going to feel very differently about it. So, I'm going to say that I will give The Phantom of the Opera 3.5 stars. I think it's a wonderful story, no matter how it's being told. I think that the actors really try. I think the production design, the costume, all of that stuff is incredible. When they have Robert Englund in the Mask of Red Death costume during the Masquerade Ball, all of this is really great, really beautiful production. But like I said, that's what I think of it. I think this is almost like the Human Centipede in a way. I think that you're going to like it or you're going to think that it's absolutely awful. But I will say this. It says on the cover, Robert Englund, Freddy in a New Nightmare, The Phantom of the Opera. That really does kind of state what this movie is about. And if you look at the cover of this and you watch my review or read a review, you're going to know what you're getting into with the movie. So if this is something that doesn't interest you, trust me, you're probably not going to like it. If you give it a chance, though, and you're open-minded, there's a lot to be enjoyed here. So that's my review of Phantom of the Opera. Please stay tuned in the next couple of days. I'm going to try to put these reviews up a little more frequently than I have been. The next film I'm going to review is from 1987. It's a horror comedy called My Demon Lover. You can probably, just off of that title, kind of see where that movie's going. But you can, just for shits and giggles, check out my review anyway. As always, if there's a horror, action, or crime film that you think is underrated or that isn't discussed very often, and you would like to hear my opinion on it, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll see what I can do about watching it and getting a review put up for you. Thanks for watching, guys, and please stay tuned for more Priceless B movies.